Hi everyone, Amy here. I just wanted to check in with some final feedback on our discussion from last week. This was our final discussion of Unit 1, focusing on the summary essay, and of course it was also our first peer review workshop of the semester. So if you haven't already, please do check out my midweek comments. Those are at the top here. A lot of what I focused on in that video has to do with what I saw, or excuse me, it's a couple of videos, has to do with what I saw in your actual rough drafts that you posted, and I tried to provide feedback that would be relevant to each of the three different articles so that it would make sense no matter which of them you had chosen to write about. So again, please do look at that if you haven't already. So today I wanted to talk more about what the actual process of peer review was like in this activity. I was really impressed with a lot of what I saw in your reflections at the end of the week especially, but I did think that several of you struggled with the actual process of providing feedback to your peers, and so I wanted to take some time at the beginning to talk about that process and what it looked like and provide some good examples and talk about how I would like for it to go in the future. So I will just start out focusing mainly on the comments that you guys provided to one another. The most important thing when you are doing these workshop discussions, because they're different from our regular discussions, is to just make sure that you're paying really close attention to the feedback, or excuse me, the instructions that I've provided as they're described here. Just like you would in any other discussion, there's going to be your overall prompt for the activity at the top, right? And so you want to make sure that you're addressing each part of this. And I think Peter mentioned this in his reflection at the end of the week, so I appreciated that. But just make sure that, you know, the instructions are described very specifically, but if you don't pay attention to every little thing, you might get a little bit mixed up. So it's just really important to make sure that you are doing exactly what it says here so that everyone gets really useful feedback and that everybody, of course, gets credit for the hard work that you put in towards your overall grade. So there's really two parts to what you should be doing in your critique of one another. You do need to download the essay as it says here and make actual comments on the draft using that comment feature in Word. I think I already mentioned that in one of my previous videos this week. And try to explain your reactions as much as possible. And then you are to write an overall end comment that kind of summarizes based on the examples that you saw in your in-text marginal comments, addressing each of these prompts. And as I mentioned midweek, I really do want you guys to go through and answer each individual question here in depth, in complete sentences, one at a time. I did see a couple of you who were kind of working this into paragraph form and touching on each of these things, but that's harder for the person when they get the feedback to go back and see exactly what you're talking about. Whereas if you have them numbered and you provide a discussion that, for example, might have to do with question 4, if you've numbered it 4, then I can look back maybe if I need some clarification and say, oh, here they're talking about extraneous details, because you may think you're being very clear in the feedback you provide, but sometimes it can be a little bit confusing for the writer when they get that back from you. So these prompts are worded in such a way to get you talking about exactly the things that each writer is going to need for their revisions, and so numbering them will just help you make sure that you've touched on every single thing, and it'll help the writer then follow along when they get your feedback back from you. And so then the other thing I want to highlight is this should really be a conversation between the marginal comments you provided and the overall summary points that you're making here in response to each individual question. So for example, if you're talking about the essay's organization and structure addressing question 6, you might say, you know, refer to comment number 13 where I pointed out a place where the organization felt like it was getting a little lost or you were rambling, or on the other hand where you were doing it really well and you really focused on the thesis or something like that. So you really want to take those specific examples and tie them into the summary points that you're providing here. There were really only a couple of you who actually executed this correctly. Most of you guys did a really good job with the in-text marginal comments, but then provided just a couple of summary points at the end instead of addressing each of these prompts in depth. So you might see that reflected in your grade if you were one of those people, but do please make sure for future workshops that you're giving this kind of in-depth constructive feedback, because I've designed the workshop in such a way that it ties directly to the assignment sheet and the rubric and what you're being asked to do for the assignment as a whole. Okay, so just a couple of other points on how to execute your feedback to one another. I did see that maybe one or two of you had revised your rough draft based on the feedback you received, and that's great. But please do just post one thread per person. So when you revise your essay, don't go back and start a new thread, because that might be confusing for some of your classmates, and you might end up getting feedback from two different people, and then we end up with another classmate who doesn't get feedback from anybody. So it's just really important that each person revises one person's essay, and that each essay receives feedback from one person, so that everybody gets even coverage and that everyone in the class can get feedback. So I did notice that several of you did not receive feedback, and I think it's partly because some people didn't give feedback at all. Some people gave feedback to someone who may have already posted their essay in a different thread, or some of you provided feedback to people who already had received feedback within the same thread. And so this was something I was really trying to emphasize throughout the week, is make sure that you do not post feedback to someone who has already received feedback from another classmate. Now, I know it can be difficult when there may only be a few minutes in between the different posts. I think maybe this was an example. Let me see. No, this was a different one. I'll show you in just a minute. Not this one. I know it was somewhere. Okay, yes, this is exactly. So Kendall, for example, posted her feedback at 9:21, and Matthew posted his at 9:39. So I'm sure when Matthew was completing his review, he was not aware that Kendall was also going to be providing a review. But that is why it's often a good idea when you start your review to go ahead and post an initial comment that says, I'm starting working on your review now, so that anyone that goes into that person's thread at the same time can see that there's already someone working on that review. Because as we know, the reviews are very in-depth and they can sometimes take, hours. So let me provide just a better example of that I thought was more successful. Emily's thread that I'll get to in just a second, actually I might go back, had a lot of examples of things to do well and things that I think could have been executed more effectively, or that exemplify some of the things that might have been hiccups in the process for us this week. So let me go find that. Here it is. Okay, so initially, was it Emily's? No, it's not Emily's thread. I'm sorry. It's the one that Emily provided feedback to. So let me go up. I'm getting confused. Might have been Jamie's. Yeah. So here we see Jamie's post. She's got it up there. She was one of the people that accidentally put it in the Dropbox first, so then I just said move it over quickly, and that was fine. But here you can see that Emily has come in Friday night at 8 o'clock and said, we only have a few hours left, so I'm going to go ahead and let you know I am working on revising your essay. So now anyone that comes in should read those comments. Don't just click on it, actually pay attention to the conversation that's going on here, and see, okay, Emily must be working on this. I'm going to go on to someone else. But we do have a couple of people that came in after that, and even after Emily had posted her entire set of feedback and provided additional comments to Jamie here. So we can see Jamie's gotten feedback from Emily, Tabitha, and Nicole. Whereas Tabitha and Nicole, if they had seen this original post, could have gone on and provided feedback to one of the other students who did not receive feedback. So this is kind of what I mean when I say, make sure that you're trying to provide as much even coverage to every single student as you can. And if you see that someone's already got a review, or someone's already kind of called it, so to speak, that you do go on to someone else. So those are kind of what I was saying about could have been executed more effectively here. But I did think that there were some really good things happening in the feedback provided to Jamie, one of which is this kind of heads up that Emily provided. I do like to see this because it's very helpful to your classmates. But in addition to that, I thought that Emily provided a really strong set of feedback, so I wanted to provide that as an example for you guys here. I did have that video up this week, or this last week, about how to go through the workshop process, and it was actually a set of a few videos. But Emily kind of stuck it, so to speak. She did a good job with it, so I wanted to highlight it as well as kind of another example. So what you can see here is that Emily has provided 2 documents, the first of which is the downloaded version of the essay with marginal comments, and the marginal comments are very in-depth, specific, and constructive, and the whole thing is covered. Then once you go into the second document, you see that she actually has addressed every single one of those 9 prompts from the instructions for this activity, in-depth, incomplete sentences. Let's see if this will download for me. Come on, let me try it again. In comment doc, there we go. Okay, so she's got a few summary comments, and some of you did this as well, but then she also goes through and provides in-depth feedback for each one of those 9 prompts. And so this is really what I want to see. This is what I'm looking for when I talk on the rubric about strong feedback. And so in terms of how you're going to be graded on your feedback this week, make sure that in the future you do go through and address all 9 prompts so that you get as many points as you possibly can. Okay, so before I run out of time here, I did want to highlight what you guys did really well with this week, which is the overall reflections that you provided at the end of the week. And so I have some examples here that I wanted to pull out for some 5 minutes of fame, just to kind of end on a high note. And so again, everything you guys said in your reflections was really insightful. Some of you even revised your entire essays, which was very helpful to see. And I thought several of you were able to pull out some very strong, actionable ideas for what you would change in your revisions throughout this week, because the essay isn't due until Friday. So here this person says, while I didn't end up getting any feedback on the rough draft of my essay, I think that these types of workshops are helpful in gaining an understanding of what can be improved in our writing. I think it is valuable to critique other people's work, both because it helps them, but also because it can show you what mistakes or inadequacies are common, in case these can be found in your own work. True. I think that the feedback I provided could have been improved upon had I read Chapter 8 before completing it. I look forward to completing more of these workshops in the future and improving on the feedback that I give. So several things I want to pull out of this reflection that I thought were poignant. You know, why are these workshops helpful? Well, we can understand what we need to improve upon in our writing from the feedback we get from other people, but we can also see the kind of mistakes that other people are making and start to be more aware of those in our own writing. So that is very insightful. And then also I do see this here. A lot of you commented about Chapter 8 in your reflections. Always try to look through if you don't read it word for word the first time, at least look through the chapter and do watch the lecture videos for the week, because those will always help you with the discussions because they're tied together very closely. And we will be doing workshops for all of the remaining essays this semester as well. This person said, I think this workshop will help me a lot as we continue on to the final editing of the summary. Oftentimes it's hard for me to divorce my paper as the book phrased it and see it from the other perspective. Having a fresh set of eyes, Peter's in my case, helped me look at a phrase or even a single word and see it from both the writer's and the reader's point of view. I think that's vital to the success of any paper because you could easily confuse a reader or set the wrong tone, and a successful workshop addresses those issues that you may have never noticed. I can tell Peter took his time to provide constructive comments on my paper in order to help me improve it, and I did the same for the summary I chose to workshop. If we all strive to get the best workshop we can, we will receive the same in return and will become stronger readers and writers. So some very insightful things here. I want to point out first just a semantic issue with the word editing here. At this point, we're really not even editing. We are in the stage of true revision. Usually we think of editing more as like proofreading or looking for grammar or spelling, punctuation things, whereas at this point I want you guys to be doing more of that global revision where you're actually looking for strengths and weaknesses in your essay and how you can more closely tie it to the learning objectives and what's described in the rubric. So save your editing for the very end, and sometimes we even do that as we go with spell check and some of the tools in the computers now. So just wanted to kind of point out the difference between those things there. But then again, this is very insightful. Just all of this about the relationship between the reader and the writer. I mean, of course, that is absolutely the benefit of workshop and how it ties into our ability to revise and improve on our writing. So that was very insightful too. And then quickly, this last one, I liked participating in this group review because it provided a lot of good insights into where I need to make clarifications and how I can organize my paper better. I enjoyed reading other people's papers because I can relate easily to theirs. I'm writing the same paper as everyone else, so it gives me a chance to focus on how to use rhetoric since I'm already familiar with the subject. I'm going to run out of time, but I just want to say I like this because it has a lot of strong examples of things to improve